The rain in Sector 4 never washed anything clean. It just made the filth slicker, turned the cobblestones into mirrors that reflected a city no one wanted to see twice. Rowena Hartley walked those streets with her head down, her collar pulled high against the wind that cut through the gray market like a knife through butter. In her pocket, her grandmother's copper coin pressed warm against her palm. The only inheritance that mattered. The last piece of a bloodline she did not yet understand. She had learned long ago that looking up only invited trouble. Looking up meant making eye contact, and eye contact meant existing. In the gray market, it was safer not to exist. She was 23 years old and had perfected the art of invisibility, not the magical kind that the wolves whispered about in their mountain territories. No, hers was the practical kind, the kind that came from years of serving food to people who looked through her as though she were made of glass. The kind that let her slip through crowds without a single person noticing she had passed. The kind that kept predators from circling too close. Most days that invisibility felt like armor. Today it felt like a coffin. The silver kettle opened at 5 in the morning, and Ro was always there at 4:30 to prep the kitchen. She sliced bread until her fingers cramped. She scrubbed boss until the skin on her knuckles cracked and bled. She smiled at customers who snapped their fingers at her as though she were a dog and said thank you when they left coins that barely covered the cost of her bus fare home. By noon, she was at the rusty nail, washing dishes in water so hot it left her hands red and throbbing. By 6, she was delivering parcels for Old Man Hendricks, carrying boxes up 6 flights of stairs to apartments where people took their packages without ever looking at her face. 3 jobs, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and still it was not enough. Her father had seen to that. Daniel Hartley had been a good man. Everyone said so at his funeral 3 weeks ago. Good man, kind heart, terrible luck. They did not mention his gambling problem. They did not mention the loan he had taken from Vincent Malone. They did not mention the number that Roe had found written on a scrap of paper in his coat pocket after the heart attack took him. A number with so many zeros it had made her stomach turn to acid. 50,000 silver pieces. It might as well have been 50 million. The deadline was 4 days away. Vince had been clear about what would happen if she could not pay. His men had been equally clear about the various ways a young woman could work off a debt in the gray market. The brothel in Sector 5, the fight pits in Sector 7, the auction blocks where desperate people sold themselves for enough coin to survive another month. Ro had thought about running. She had packed a bag twice and sat on her bed staring at the door. But where would she go? The human territories were crowded and dangerous. The wolf territories did not welcome lone humans, especially not women with no skills beyond serving food and scrubbing floors. And the gray market, for all its ugliness, was the only home she had ever known. So she had unpacked the bag, twice. And now, walking through the rain toward the one place she had sworn she would never go, she carried with her the last piece of her grandmother's legacy. A single copper coin pressed into her palm so tightly that she could feel the raised edges cutting into her skin. Her grandmother had pressed it into her hand years ago, whispering words Ro had thought were fever dreams. Ancient words about queens and prophecies and invisible bloodlines. Words that made no sense to a child scrubbing floors. 1 saint's tear, the lowest denomination of currency in the realm. Enough for a loaf of stale bread or a ferry ride across the sludge river. Enough she hoped to buy herself a second chance. The auction yard sat at the edge of Sector 4, where the human slums bled into the no man's land between territories. It was not an official market. Those had rules and regulations and people who pretended to care about things like human dignity. This was the gray market within the gray market, the place where laws went to die, where people went to die. Ro pushed through the crowd, keeping her eyes down out of habit. The auction yard was packed, merchants looking for cheap labor, mercenaries looking for disposable bodies, collectors looking for exotic specimens. She felt eyes on her back, heard the murmurs that followed young women in places like this. But she kept moving, kept walking, kept her hand wrapped around the coin in her pocket. The auctioneer stood on a wooden platform that sagged under his weight. Garrett Stone was a man whose skin looked like old leather left too long in the sun, creased and cracked, and somehow still holding together. He wore a coat that had been expensive once before the moths got to it. He smelled of cheap cigars and decay, a scent that made Ro's stomach clench. He was halfway through lot 46 when she arrived. A young man, barely more than a boy, his wrist bound with iron, sold for 3 silver pieces to a mine foreman who dragged him away by his hair. Ro looked away. Next up, Garrett bellowed, cracking his whip against the platform. His voice carried over the crowd in thick waves. Lot 47, Found him wandering near the obsidian peaks. Big bastard, strong back. Shame about the rest. Two men dragged a figure onto the stage. Not a figure, a man. But he moved his dead weight, his body limp between them. They dropped him, and he collapsed forward onto his knees with a sound that made Roe wince. He was huge. Even on his knees, he towered over the men who had dragged him up. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the weak afternoon light. His torso was bare, and Roe could see the landscape of violence written across his skin. Scars everywhere. Old ones silvered with time. New ones still angry and red. But the defining feature, the thing that made the crowd shift uneasily, was the burlap sack tied over his head. "What is wrong with his face?" someone shouted from the back. Garrett spat onto the platform. "Ugly as sin, probably. Or maybe he has got the rot. Who cares? Look at the size of him. Use him for hauling until he drops. Bidding starts at 5 silver pieces." The crowd went silent. 5 silver was too much for damaged goods. 5 silver was too much for a man who could not even stand on his own. The rain fell harder. The man on his knees did not move. His head was bowed low, the burlap sack soaking through, clinging to the shape of his skull. His wrists were bound with chains that looked wrong. Too bright, too clean. Silver-infused iron, Roe realized with a jolt. The kind that hurt wolves, the kind that kept them weak and compliant. "Was he a wolf, no takers?" Garrett sneered. "Come on, look at those shoulders. Work him until his legs give out. Use him for parts if you want." The silence stretched. The rain drummed against the platform. Garrett pulled a knife from his belt. The blade was serrated and stained with rust or blood. "Fine. I am not feeding him another night. I will slit his throat right here and save the cage space." The man in the sack did not flinch. He did not beg. He just knelt there in the rain, his chest rising and falling in slow measured breaths. Accepting the end. That resignation broke Rowena. It was the same look her father had worn the night his heart gave out. That quiet acceptance, that bone-deep exhaustion, that sense that fighting was just too hard, and maybe it was easier to let go. She had held her father's hand as the light left his eyes. She had whispered that it was okay to rest, that she would be fine. She had lied, but she could not lie to herself anymore. She could not walk away. She could not let another person die because the world had decided they were not worth the trouble of living. "Wait," her voice cracked. Too quiet. The crowd did not hear. "Wait," she said again, louder this time. She pushed through the ring of mercenaries, their laughter dying, as she stepped into the open space around the platform. The mud sucked at her boots. The rain soaked through her coat. But she kept moving until she was standing at the edge of the stage looking up at Garrett Stone. He looked down at her, and for a moment amusement flickered across his face. "Well now, little Roe, you here to serve drinks, sweetheart? I want to buy him." The crowd erupted into laughter. Someone whistled. Someone else made a comment that turned her stomach. But Roe kept her eyes on Garrett, with what he asked. "Your father's debt, I heard about that. Vince is going to have fun with you." Rowena reached into her pocket. Her fingers found the coin warm from being pressed against her skin for hours. She pulled it out and held it up so the light caught the tarnished copper surface. 1 saint's tear. Garrett stared at the coin. Then he stared at her. Then he threw his head back and laughed so hard he doubled over. The crowd joined him. It was a joke, an insult. A girl with no money offering a copper coin for a man who was worth at minimum 5 silver pieces. 500 times what she held in her hand. But Roe did not lower her hand. "You said you were going to kill him?" she said. Her voice was steady now. "Clear. That is 0 profit. This is 1 profit. I am offering you more than death." Garrett stopped laughing. He looked at the coin. He looked at the knife in his hand. He looked at the man kneeling in the rain, silent and still as a statue. Then he shrugged. "Sold. To the girl with the death wish." He kicked the prisoner in the ribs. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make a point. "Get up, dog. You belong to the waitress now." The man did not move. Rowena scrambled up onto the platform, ignoring the jeers and catcalls from the crowd. She reached for the man's arm, and the moment her fingers touched his skin, she jerked back. He was burning. Not with fever, though there was that too, but with heat that radiated from him in waves. Heat that made her palm tingle and her breath catch. "Please," she whispered, leaning close to where his ear should be under the sack. "You have to get up. If you do not walk, I cannot carry you. And if we stay here, we both die." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a sound rumbled in his chest. Not a growl, not a word. Just a low grinding noise that sounded as though stone were breaking under pressure. as though an ancient thing deep inside him were cracking open. Slowly, painfully, the man began to move. Muscles bunched under the scars. His shoulders rolled back. His spine straightened. He rose to his feet in sections unfolding in a way that reminded Roe of mountains rising from the earth. Inevitable. Immense. He swayed. Rowena grabbed his arm with both hands, trying to steady him. He was well over 6 feet tall, maybe closer to 7. His shadow swallowed her whole. "Come on," she said. One step, then another. He took a step, then another. His breathing was labored, wet, and ragged, but he moved. She kept her hand on his arm, guiding him through the crowd. People parted for them, not out of respect, out of instinct. The way animals moved aside for predators, even injured ones. Rowena did not look back. She gripped the chain connecting his wrists and pulled him into the maze of alleyways that led away from the auction yard, away from Garrett Stone and his knife, away from the people who would have watched him die for entertainment. She had paid 1 copper coin for a man she could not see. She told herself she had just saved a life. She did not know she had just bought a king. Getting him up the stairs was a nightmare. Rose's apartment was technically a converted storage closet above a bakery that had closed down 6 months ago. It smelled of old yeast and damp wood, but it had a lock on the door. That made it a palace in the gray market. The stairs were narrow and steep, and the man stumbled twice. Each time Rose thought he would take them both down, that they would crash through the rotten banister and break their necks on the floor below. But each time he caught himself, found his balance, kept climbing. By the time they reached the top, Rose's arms were shaking and her lungs burned. She fumbled with the key, got the door open, and guided him inside. He stood in the center of the room, dripping rainwater and mud onto her only rug. His chest heaved with each breath. The burlap sack clung to his head, outlining sharp features beneath the rough fabric. Rowena locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, let out a breath she felt she had been holding since the moment she left the auction yard. "Okay," she said, turning to face him. "Rule number 1. You do not hurt me. I do not hurt you. I feed you. You look scary when bad men come knocking." "Deal." He said nothing. "I need to take that thing off your head," she continued, keeping her voice soft, the way she would talk to a frightened animal. "I need to see if you are human or wolf. I need to know what I brought home." He still did not speak, but he did not move away when she approached. Rowena reached up her fingers, finding the knot at the base of his skull. It was soaked through and pulled tight. She worked at it with her fingernails, trying to be gentle, even though her hands were shaking. It took longer than it should have. The rough fabric scraped against her skin. Finally, the knot came loose. She pulled the sack away and gasped. He was not ugly. He was not rotting. He was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache and her breath catch. His hair was dark as midnight, matted with blood and mud, but thick and falling into his eyes. His jaw was strong, covered in days of stubble that did nothing to hide the sharp line of it. A jagged cut ran from his temple to his cheekbone, still weeping blood, but it did not ruin his face. It gave him a dangerous edge, a sword that had been tested and proven. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Amber, not brown, not hazel. Amber, the color of honey held up to sunlight, the color of ancient resin with insects trapped inside. Wolf eyes. And right now they were unfocused and burning with pain. Wolf, Rowena whispered. He blinked, trying to focus on her face. His lips cracked when he tried to speak. The word came out as a rasp, barely audible. Water. She ran to the kitchenette, filled a chipped mug from the tap, and hurried back. She held it to his lips, and he drank as though he had been drowning in reverse. Water spilled down his chin, washing away streaks of dirt and blood. "Slow down," she said gently. "You will make yourself sick." He finished the cup and let his head fall back. It hit the wall with a soft thunk. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. His nostrils flared, inhaling her scent. "Who?" he rasped. "I am Rowena. Ro, I bought you. Well, I paid the exit fee. I do not believe in owning people." A dry, bitter sound that might have been a laugh scraped out of his throat. "Everyone owns someone." "Not here," she said firmly. She moved to the cabinet under the sink, pulling out her first aid kit, a bottle of cheap whiskey, some clean rags. "That cut on your face is infected. And your wrists." She looked at the silver cuffs. The skin underneath was black and blistered, weeping clear fluid that smelled like burnt meat. Silver was poison to wolves. It blocked their healing, kept them weak. Left too long, it would drive them mad. "I do not have the key," she said, panic rising in her throat. "Garrett did not give me the key." The man closed his eyes. Wolf's bane. In the blood. Rowena understood. They had been drugging him, keeping him sedated so he could not shift, could not fight. The silver was just backup. The drug was the real chain. I can clean the wound, she said, pouring whiskey onto a rag. But the silver has to come off. I have a hacksaw. It is for pipes. It will take hours. Do it, he growled through gritted teeth. So she did. Rowena spent the next 4 hours on her knees in front of a stranger. The hacksaw was dull and the work was brutal. Every time the blade slipped and grazed his skin, where the silver touched, his entire body locked up. Muscles turned to steel cables. Tendons stood out in sharp relief. But he never cried out, never begged her to stop. She learned the geography of his pain in those hours. The way he held his breath when she worked near his ribs. The way his hands clenched into fists when the saw hit a particularly thick section of chain. The way his eyes tracked the door every time a floorboard creaked in the hall outside. And she talked. She did not know why. Maybe because the silence felt too heavy. Maybe because she needed to fill the space with a voice other than the rasp of metal on metal. Maybe because she had spent so long being invisible that it felt strange to be seen even by a stranger in chains. She told him about her father, about the gambling, about the debt, about Vince Malone and his men, and the 4 days she had left before they came to collect. You are a fool, the man said quietly. His voice was getting stronger as the night wore on. You spent your last coin on a dead man. You should have bought a knife. I am not a killer, Rowena said softly. Then you will be a victim, he replied. His amber eyes bored into hers. What is your name again? Rowena. Row. He tested the name. It sounded strange on his tongue, as though he were more used to giving orders than speaking gently. I am Nathaniel. He did not give a last name. He did not say, I am Nathaniel Ashcroft, Alpha King of the Obsidian Peaks. He could not. That man had died the day his brother slipped wolf's bane into his wine and sold him to slavers, while his kingdom watched paralyzed by lies. If he told her who he was, she would run. Or worse, she would try to ransom him back to his enemies for enough money to clear her debt. Just Nathaniel, she asked. Just Nathaniel. With a final grinding snap, the chain between his wrists broke. The cuffs were still there, locked tight around each wrist, but his hands were free to move independently now. Nathaniel let out a long, shuddering breath. He looked at his hands, flexing stiff fingers, testing the range of motion. He could feel the wolf inside him, buried under layers of poison, stirring. Weak, distant, but there. He looked at the small human woman sitting cross-legged in front of him. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were blistered and stained with his blood. She smelled like rain and cheap soap, and beneath that, a scent that made the wolf inside him lift its head and whine. Mate. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The moon goddess, in her infinite and twisted sense of humor, had bound him to this fragile human girl in the slums of the gray market. This woman who had bought him for a copper coin and spent 4 hours freeing his hands without asking for anything in return. He could not claim her. Not now. He was a king without a throne, a wolf without a pack. If his enemies knew she was his mate, they would not just kill her. They would use her to break him completely. They would hurt her in ways that would make his own torture look like mercy. So he would lie. He would pretend she was a means to an end, a temporary ally, someone he owed a debt to, nothing more. Thank you, he said. It was the first time in 6 months he had said those words to anyone. Do not thank me yet, Rose said, standing and stretching her back. Vince's men come in 4 days. You need to be able to stand without falling over by then. Nathaniel looked at her legs, then up to her face. A protective instinct flared in his chest. Not the alpha's duty to protect his territory. Deeper than that, she had fed him, she had freed his hands. She had given him back a piece of his humanity. 4 days, he repeated. Who is Vince? A loan shark? A human? His lip curled. A human threatening his mate. The wolf inside growled, and this time the sound was audible. A rumble that vibrated the floorboards. Ro took a step back, her eyes widening. Do not worry, little copper, Nathaniel said, using the nickname that appeared in his mind unbidden. He slowly stood. He was still dizzy, still weak, but the freedom of his hands gave him balance. He towered over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. By the time Vince's men arrived, he vowed, his voice dropping to a rumble that made the windows rattle. They will wish they had never learned your name. The next 3 days passed in a strange domestic rhythm that neither of them acknowledged. Nathaniel healed with a speed that should have been impossible for someone who had been starved and poisoned for months. The smaller cuts vanished overnight. The deep gash on his face sealed into a thin silver line. He spent hours doing push-ups on her floor, sweat slicking his skin as he burned the last of the poison from his blood. Ro worked her shifts at the silver kettle and the rusty nail. She brought home scraps of meat that she told Nathaniel the cook had thrown out. She did not mention that she had paid for them with tips she could not afford to spare. She did not mention the way her own stomach cramped with hunger because she was giving him most of her food. He noticed. Of course he noticed. But he said nothing. Instead, he fixed things, the leaky faucet that had driven her mad for months, the window that always stuck and let in the cold, unnamed, the loose floorboard that creaked every time she walked over it. He worked in silence, his movements economical and precise. The movements of someone who had spent a lifetime in control of his body. On the second night, Ro came home to find him standing at the stove stirring a pot. Soup, he said, without turning around. From the scraps you brought yesterday. You did not have to do that. You gave me your bed. I am sleeping on the floor. The least I can do is cook. They ate in silence. The soup was better than anything Ro had made in her life. Rich and savory, with herbs she did not know she had. Afterwards, she washed the dishes while he sat in the corner, watching her with those unnerving amber eyes. You do not have to do this, she said without turning around. On the fourth day, when Vince's men come, you could leave, slip out the back. You owe me nothing. I owe you everything, Nathaniel said quietly. 1 copper coin is not everything. It was to you, the words hung in the air between them. Ro turned to look at him, and for a moment their eyes met. She saw an intensity in his gaze that made her breath catch, a searching desperation. Then he looked away. You paid, he said, his voice hardening. I honor the contract. On the third night, Ro could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to Nathaniel's breathing from the floor beside her. It was deep and even, but she knew he was not asleep. She could feel his awareness in the room with her. Why did you let them catch you? She whispered into the darkness. A long silence. Then I did not let them. My brother poisoned me, betrayed me, sold me. Why? Because I failed him when he needed me most. Ro rolled onto her side, looking down at the shadow on her floor. What did you fail to do? Nathaniel was quiet for so long that she thought he would not answer. Then I was a king. He was my second, my brother in all but blood. His mate died 3 years ago in a war that started, a territorial conflict with the northern clans. She was caught in the crossfire, collateral damage. Ro's throat tightened. Did you know she was his mate? Not until after. He never told me. I think he was afraid I would treat him differently, that I would see him as weak for loving a human. She was human, yes. Nathaniel's voice was raw. Isolde. Her name was Isolde. She was a healer. She worked in the villages along the border. When the northern clans attacked, she was tending to the wounded. She died in the bombardment. And your brother blamed you. My brother Gabriel blamed himself for not being there, for being at court with me instead of with her. But it is easier to blame someone else, so he blamed me. Ro closed her eyes. I am sorry. So am I. Nathaniel shifted on the floor. I should have seen it. Should have known he was drowning. But I was the king. I had a kingdom to run. I thought he was strong enough to handle his grief. No one is that strong. No, no one is. They lay in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence now. Warmer, less heavy, Ro Nathaniel said after a while. Yes, when this is over, when Vince's men are dealt with. I need to go back, to the Obsidian Peaks, to my kingdom. I know, and you should not come with me. Why? Because it is dangerous, because Gabriel will kill anyone I care about, because you deserve better than to be dragged into a war between wolves. Rose sat up looking down at him in the darkness. Who says I am coming with you? She could see the gleam of his eyes as he looked up at her. Are you not? I have not decided yet. It was alarm, and they both knew it. The fourth day arrived with gray skies and the smell of rain. Ro went to work at the silver kettle, but she could not focus. She dropped a tray of dishes, spilled coffee on a customer's lap, got yelled at by the manager until her ears rang. By noon, she gave up and went home. Nathaniel was waiting. He had pulled on a hooded sweatshirt she had found at a second-hand shop. It was too small for him, the sleeves ending halfway down his forearms, but it covered his face when he pulled the hood up. They will come at sunset, he said. That is when collectors always come, when people are home from work, when they have nowhere to run. You have done this before. I have been many things, Ro, not all of them good. They waited. The sun crept across the floor. The shadows lengthened. Rose sat at her small table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Nathaniel stood by the window watching the street below. When the knock came, it was not gentle. Open up, Ro, a voice called through the door, thick and mocking. Daddy's dead as due, Marco, Vince's lead enforcer. a man who smiled when he hurt people. Rose stood. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Nathaniel. He had moved to the armchair in the corner, pulling the hood low over his face, hiding in shadow. "Open it," he said softly. Roe unlocked the door. Marco pushed his way in, followed by two thugs carrying baseball bats. He grinned, revealing a gold tooth that caught the lamplight. "There she is. Look, boys, she has got the money ready, right?" "I have 200, Roe said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I need more time for the rest." Marco clicked his tongue. "Time is up, sweetheart. Vince said if you are short, we take collateral. Nice place. We can sell the furniture. Maybe sell you to the brothel in Sector 5. You would fetch a good price." One of the thugs reached for Roe's arm. The growl that filled the room did not sound human. It was low and subsonic thunder rolling in from a distance, the kind of sound that made prey animals freeze in their tracks. The thugs froze. "You gotta Roe," Marco laughed, but it sounded nervous. "Let her go," the voice came from the corner. Calm, dark, dripping with authority. Nathaniel stood. He kept the hood up, but his size was unmistakable. He stepped into the light, and even with his face hidden, the sheer presence of him filled the room. "Who is the boyfriend?" Marco sneered, trying to regain his bravado. "Listen, pal, this is business. Walk away and keep your kneecaps." "You touched her," Nathaniel said. He took a step forward. "That was a mistake." "Get him," Marco yelled. The thug with the bat swung. It was a vicious blow aimed at Nathaniel's head. Nathaniel did not dodge. He caught the bat mid-swing with one hand. The wood cracked under his grip. With a casual flick of his wrist, he wrenched the bat away and backhanded the thug across the face. The man flew across the room, crashed into the kitchenette with a sickening thud, and did not get up. The second thug pulled a knife. Nathaniel moved faster than Roe could track. He closed the distance, grabbed the man by the throat, and lifted him off the ground with one arm. The thug kicked helplessly, feet dangling, face turning purple. "Leave," Nathaniel whispered to the choking man. "Tell your boss, if he sends anyone else, if he even thinks about her again, I will find him. I will peel the skin from his bones. Do you understand?" The thug nodded frantically. Nathaniel threw him out the door as though he were nothing. The man tumbled down the stairs, crashing and crying out. Marco was alone now. He was trembling, reaching for a pistol in his waistband. "Do not," Nathaniel warned. Marco pulled the gun anyway. Nathaniel's hood fell back. Marco saw the eyes, the glowing amber. "Wolf," Marco gasped. "You are a stray. You are nothing." Nathaniel stepped closer, looming over the enforcer. He leaned down until his face was inches from Marco's. "I am not a stray," Nathaniel said softly. "And if you ever come near this door again, if you ever look at her again, I will find you. And I will make you wish you had never been born. Do you understand?" Marco nodded. A dark stain spread across the front of his pants. "Run." Marco ran. He stumbled over his unconscious comrade and practically threw himself down the stairs. Silence returned to the apartment. Roe was pressed against the wall, her heart hammering. She had seen violence before. The gray market was full of it. But this was different. This was controlled, efficient. The violence of someone who had done it 1,000 times before and knew exactly how much force to use. Nathaniel turned to her. The golden glow faded from his eyes, returning to warm honey. He looked at her, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Rose shook her head slowly. "Who are you?" "Really?" Nathaniel looked at the open door, then at the woman who had saved him. The woman who was his mate, whether she knew it or not. He could not lie anymore. Not after showing his strength. Not after defending her in that way. "I am someone who has been gone too long," he said heavily, "and I have to go back." He walked to the window, looking toward the distant mountains. "The Obsidian Peaks. My name is Nathaniel Ashcroft," he said, turning to face her. "And someone has stolen my throne." Roe gasped. Every child in the realm knew the name Ashcroft, the Alpha King, the strongest wolf of his generation. "The king," she whispered. "I bought a king for a penny. And that penny," Nathaniel said, crossing the room to her, "bought you my protection. Forever. I have to go to the peaks, Roe. I have to take back what was stolen. And I have to stop Gabriel before he destroys everything I built." "You will die alone," she said. "You have no pack, no army, no resources. I have my claws. You need a way in. The borders are closed. But I know smugglers. I know routes. I can help." "No." Nathaniel's voice was sharp. "It is too dangerous. You belong to me, remember," Rose said. A strange, fierce courage was rising in her chest. "I have the receipt. 1 copper coin. You do not go anywhere without your owner's permission. Nathaniel stared at her. He should command her to stay. He should use his alpha voice, make her obey. But looking at the fire in her eyes, he knew it would be useless. She was his mate, stubborn as he was, brave as he was, perhaps braver. Pack your bag, the Alpha King said. A hint of a dangerous smile played at the corner of his mouth. We leave at dawn. Ro nodded. She did not know what she was walking into. She did not know that Gabriel had a son. She did not know about the prophecy hidden in the copper coin. She did not know that she was descended from the first human queen, or that her ability to see the invisible would save a kingdom. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, someone saw her, really saw her, and that was worth risking everything. Dawn came slowly to the gray market, bleeding through the smog and shades of rust and ash. Rowena stood at her window watching the city wake below, vendors opening their stalls, workers shuffling toward factories, the same people walking the same paths they had walked yesterday and would walk tomorrow. A life measured in repetition. She was leaving it behind. Her bag sat by the door, small and pathetic. 2 changes of clothes. The first aid kit. What was left of the bread? Everything she owned in the world fit into a canvas sack that weighed less than 5 pounds. Nathaniel emerged from the bathroom, his hair still damp. He had washed properly for the first time since she brought him home, and the transformation was startling. Without the layers of blood and grime, he looked younger. Still dangerous, still marked by violence, but younger. The cut on his face had healed to a thin silver line that caught the morning light. You do not have to do this, he said. It was the 3rd time he had said it since midnight. I know, Ro replied. It was the 3rd time she had answered. They left as the sun crested the rooftops. Ro locked her door, then stood there with the key in her hand looking at the peeling paint and warped wood. 23 years of her life had happened behind that door. Her childhood, her father's slow decline. The nights after his death when she had cried so hard she thought her ribs would crack. She slipped the key under the mat. If she came back, she would need it. If she did not, someone else would. The streets were crowded with morning traffic. Ro kept her head down out of habit, but she could feel Nathaniel beside her, a solid presence that drew eyes despite the hood pulled low over his face. People moved out of their way without quite knowing why. That animal instinct that recognized predators even when they were trying to hide. They caught the early ferry across the sludge river, standing at the rail as the gray market fell away behind them. The water was thick and gray-green, moving slowly as though half dead. Industrial runoff mixed with sewage, mixed with things Ro did not want to think about. Have you ever been outside the market? Nathaniel asked. Once, when I was 10. My father took me to see the ocean. We stood on the beach and he told me that somewhere across that water was a place where people did not have to fight for every scrap, where children grew up fat and happy. Did you believe him? I wanted to. Ro watched the city shrink, but I think he was lying. I think the whole world is the gray market, just different names for the same struggle. Nathaniel was quiet. Then, maybe you are right. Or maybe we are just the ones who got unlucky, born in the wrong place. Wrong time, wrong family. Do you believe in luck? No. He turned to look at her, and even with the hood shadowing his face, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. I believe in choices. Every person standing on that dock back there is there because of choices, theirs or someone else's. Luck is just what people call it when they do not want to take responsibility. Harsh. True. The ferry docked on the eastern shore and they entered the borderlands. The landscape changed almost immediately. Buildings gave way to scrubland. Pavement gave way to dirt roads that turned to mud when it rained. The air smelled different here. Cleaner. Sharper. The world felt less tired. They walked for hours. Nathaniel set a brutal pace, his long strides eating up the distance. Rose struggled to keep up, her legs burning, her lungs aching. But she did not complain, did not ask to rest. She had made this choice. She would live with it. Around noon, they stopped beside a stream. Ro collapsed onto a fallen log, gasping. Nathaniel knelt by the water, cupped his hands, and drank deeply. When he finished, he filled his palms again and brought the water to Ro. Drink, you are dehydrated. She drank from his hands. The water was cold and tasted of minerals. His skin was warm against her lips. Thank you, he nodded and moved away, putting distance between them again. He did that often, she noticed. Got close, then retreated, fighting himself. They ate in silence. Dried meat and hard cheese that Nathaniel had somehow acquired before they left. Ro did not ask where he got it, did not want to know. When they started walking again, Nathaniel spoke. Your breathing is wrong. You are gasping, taking shallow breaths from your chest. I am not exactly trained for this. No one is trained for anything. Training is just doing it wrong 1,000 times until you do it right. He demonstrated breathing deep from his belly. Like this. Slow. Fill your lungs completely, then exhale completely. Do not hold tension in your shoulders. Rowe tried. Failed. Tried again. Better, Nathaniel said. Keep doing that and shorten your stride. You are overextending, wasting energy. For the next hour, he coached her. Breathing, stride length, posture, small adjustments that made the walking hurt less. By the time the sun started to dip toward the horizon, Rowe found a rhythm. Her body still ached, but it was a manageable ache. A working ache. You are a good student, Nathaniel said as they made camp in a grove of twisted pines. You are a good teacher. I have had practice. Leading a pack means teaching, fighting techniques, hunting strategies, court politics. He paused, building a small fire with practiced efficiency. I spent 2 decades teaching young wolves how to survive, how to be more than their instincts. Do you miss it? Every day. They sat by the fire as darkness fell. The borderlands at night were alive with sounds. Insects, birds, small animals moving through the undergrowth, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howl, long and mournful. Nathaniel's head snapped up. His eyes flashed amber for a moment before he forced them back to human. Friend or enemy? Rowe asked quietly. Neither. Wild wolf, not pack. They still exist out here, beyond the territories, beyond the politics and the wars, just wolves being wolves. Do you ever wish you were one of them, furry number? Nathaniel stared into the flames. Freedom is overrated. It is just another word for having no one who needs you, no one who depends on you. I would rather be chained to purpose than free and alone. Even now, even after what Gabriel did, even now, they slept with the fire between them. Nathaniel insisted on taking first watch, sitting with his back against a tree, eyes scanning the darkness. Rowe lay wrapped in her thin blanket, listening to the night sounds. She felt exposed out here, vulnerable. In the gray market, danger came from people, and you could see people coming. Out here, danger could come from anywhere. But with Nathaniel watching over her, she felt safer than she had in months, maybe years. The second day, he taught her to fight. They had stopped for a midday break, and Nathaniel pulled a knife from his belt. Short blade, simple grip. He held it out to Rowe, handle first. Take it. She did. The weight felt wrong in her hand, too heavy, too real. Have you ever held a knife as a weapon? Number for cooking? Yes. For cutting people? No. Good. That means you do not have bad habits to unlearn. He circled her, studying her stance. The problem with most people is they think fighting is about strength, about overpowering your opponent. It is not. It is about leverage, angles, speed. He adjusted her grip, moving her fingers until the knife sat differently in her palm. There. Now it is an extension of your arm, not a separate object. When you move, it moves. When you think, it cuts. What if I do not want to cut anyone? Then you will die, and whoever wanted to hurt you will move on to the next victim. Nathaniel's voice was flat, practical. I am not teaching you to be a warrior, Rowe. I am teaching you to survive. They drilled for an hour. Basic strikes, how to hold the blade low and thrust upward, how to slash across vulnerable points, how to create distance when someone larger grabbed you. Nathaniel moved slowly, demonstrating, correcting her form. At one point, he stood behind her, his body pressed against her back, his hands guiding hers through the motion. Rowe's breath caught. She could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell earth and smoke and wildness underneath. Like this, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Fast, decisive, no hesitation. Hesitation gets you killed. His hands left hers and he stepped back abruptly, as though he had touched fire. Again, he said, practice while we walk. Get comfortable with the weight. So she did. For the rest of the day, Rowe carried the knife, adjusting her grip, imagining the movements. She felt foolish at first, then determined, then harder. By the time they made camp that night, her hand had blisters from gripping the handle too tight. Nathaniel saw them and wordlessly handed her a strip of cloth to wrap her palm. You did well today, he said. I feel as though I learned nothing. You learned the most important thing, that you can hold a weapon without dropping it. Everything else is just refinement. They ate in companionable silence. Then Nathaniel spoke again, his voice softer than usual. Why did you buy me, Rowe? Really? You could have bought food, run away, hidden until Vince forgot about you. Rowe stared into the fire. Because you were kneeling there accepting death. And I have been kneeling my whole life. Maybe not physically, but mentally. Accepting that this is all I get. This is all I deserve. Invisible. Forgettable. When I saw you kneeling there, I saw myself. And I thought, if I can save you, maybe I can save me too. Nathaniel said nothing for a long time. Then you are not invisible to me. Their eyes met across the fire. A current passed between them. Neither of them was ready to name it. The third night it rained. They took shelter in a shallow cave barely more than an overhang in the rock face. The rain came down in sheets, turning the world into a wall of water. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flickered, illuminating the landscape in stark white flashes. They sat side by side watching the storm, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Not quite touching. Tell me about Isolde, Rose said quietly. Nathaniel stiffened. Why, because Gabriel loved her. Because she died. Because that is why we are walking into a war. He was silent for so long that Rose thought he would not answer. Then I only met her twice. Once at a diplomatic function. Once when I visited the border villages after a skirmish. She was a healer. Human. Brave beyond reason. She would walk into active combat zones to pull out the wounded. Ours and theirs. She did not care about sides. Only suffering. What did Gabriel see in her peace? Nathaniel's voice was rough. Gabriel was a warrior, the best I ever trained, but he was always fighting, always angry, always at war with the world. Isolde gave him peace. When he was with her, he stopped fighting, stopped being a soldier and started being a man. And when she died, he went back to war. Only this time he was fighting me, fighting himself, fighting the whole world because the world took her away. Ro absorbed this. Do you blame yourself, Yem? Should you? Probably not, but blame does not care about should. It just sits in your chest and rots. They sat in silence as the rain drummed against stone. Lightning flashed again, and in the brief illumination, Rose saw Nathaniel's profile. Strong jaw, straight nose, the scar that marked him. He looked carved from stone, hard and unyielding. But she had seen him fix her faucet with gentle hands, had felt him adjust her grip on the knife with patience, had watched him build fires and cook food and teach her to breathe. Hard on the outside, soft underneath. Maybe that was why the moon goddess chose them for each other. Balance. The rain slowed. Nathaniel shifted and his hand brushed against hers. Neither of them moved away. Ro, he said quietly. Yes, when this is over, when we reach the peaks and face Gabriel, things will happen fast. Violently, I need you to promise me if I tell you to run, you run. You do not look back. You do not try to help. You run and you keep running until you are safe. Ro felt anger flare in her chest. So I am just a passenger, a helpless human you drag along and then discard when convenient. That is not what I said. It is what you meant. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. I am trying to keep you alive. I am alive right now. I was alive when you were kneeling in the mud waiting to die. Maybe instead of ordering me around, you should trust me to make my own choices. They glared at each other. The rain stopped. Water dripped from the overhang, each drop a small explosion on the whetstone. Then Nathaniel did an unexpected thing. He smiled. Small and brief, but real. You are right, I am sorry. I am treating you as though you are fragile. But you walked into an auction yard and bought a king with a copper coin. You spent 4 hours sawing through chains without complaining. You are facing down a debt collector and a tyrant because you think it is right. He shook his head. You are the least fragile person I have ever met. Oh. Ro's anger drained away. Oh. So, partners. He held out his hand. Ro looked at it for a moment, then took it. His palm was calloused and warm. His grip was firm but gentle. Partners, she agreed. They shook on it. And neither of them let go as fast as they should have. On the 4th day of travel, they reached Black Hollow. The mining town crouched at the base of the obsidian peaks in the way a sick animal might. Smoke rose from 100 chimneys, turning the air gray. The buildings were made of rough-cut stone and corroded metal, everything stained black with coal dust. People moved through the streets with their heads down their shoulders hunched. The weight of the place was almost physical. We are close now, Nathaniel said quietly. The peaks are just beyond those ridges. Another day's walk to the palace. Do we go around the town? Numb? We go through. There is someone here I need to see. Someone who might help us. Who Aldrich grieves. He was my quartermaster. Loyal. Smart. If anyone knows a way into the palace, it is him. They entered Black Hollow through the main road, drawing stairs, despite their attempts to blend in. Nathaniel kept his hood up, but his size made him conspicuous. Ro walked beside him, trying to project confidence she did not feel. The rusty tankard sat near the coal chutes, a dive bar that smelled of stale beer and desperation. Nathaniel led her inside, and the conversation died. Faces turned toward them. Hard faces. Suspicious faces. We are looking for Aldrich Greaves, Nathaniel said to the bartender. Tell him an old friend wants to talk. The bartender, a burly man with a scar bisecting his face, studied them. Then he jerked his head toward a back room. Through there. But if you are trouble, I am calling the watch. No trouble, Rose said quickly. Just conversation. The back room was dim and cluttered. A gray-haired man sat at a table covered in maps and papers. He looked up as they entered, and his eyes went wide. Nathaniel Aldrich. The old man stood slowly as though his joints pained him. He was tall but stooped, his face lined with age and worry. He stared at Nathaniel as though seeing a ghost. We heard rumors, Aldrich whispered. Whispers that the slave in the gray market auction was you. But I did not dare hope. It was me, B. Nathaniel lowered his hood. Gabriel betrayed me. Sold me. I need your help to get into the palace. Aldrich's face crumpled. He looked away and Rose saw his hands shaking. My king, I cannot. Cannot or will not, cannot. Aldrich's voice broke. Gabriel has my granddaughter, Maris. She is only 15. He is holding her in the dungeons. If I help you, if I do anything, he will hurt her. He has already hurt her. She sent me a letter. Her handwriting was shaking. He is torturing her to keep me compliant. Nathaniel's face went hard. Where in the dungeons? East Tower. 3rd level. But it is guarded. Warlocks and soldiers. You cannot reach her. You cannot save her. Rose stepped forward. What if we could? What if we saved her first? Both men looked at her. You are holding information we need. Rose continued. Keys, tunnel access, guard rotations, things that will help us get into the palace. But you cannot give them to us because Gabriel is holding Maris hostage. Aldrich nodded slowly. So we remove the hostage. You help us get into the palace. We extract Maris. Then you give us what we need. Everyone wins. It is impossible, Aldrich said. The palace is a fortress now. Gabriel has mercenaries. Dark magic. You will never get inside unseen. Rose smiled. A small, determined smile. That is because you are thinking of getting inside as warriors. Soldiers, people who belong there. She looked at Nathaniel. But nobody looks at the help. Nobody sees the servants and the cooks and the cleaners. I can get inside. I can be invisible. Nathaniel's eyes flashed. No, absolutely not. It is too dangerous. It is the only way. You know it is. Send me in as a new kitchen maid. I find Maris. I get her out. Then Aldrich helps us. He looked at her for a long moment. She could see the war in his eyes, the instinct to protect warring with the knowledge that she was right. Fine, he said finally, but we do this carefully. We plan every step. I am not the planning type, Roe admitted. I am more the figure it out as I go type. Nathaniel looked pained. That is what I was afraid of. They spent the next hour planning. Aldrich drew maps of the palace, showed them where Maris was being held, explained the guard rotations, the meal schedules, the hidden passages. There is a servant's entrance on the south side, Aldrich said, tracing a line on the map. They are always looking for kitchen help. Gabriel has run off most of the staff with his cruelty. If you show up looking desperate, they will hire you immediately. And Nathaniel. There are old mining tunnels that run under the mountain. They connect to the palace wine cellars. Dangerous, partially collapsed. But they are unguarded. If he can navigate them, he can get close. Close enough to help if things go wrong. Close enough to tear down the walls if he has to. Aldrich said, looking at Nathaniel with a pride that cut through the worry. They finalized the details. Roe would go in the next morning. Nathaniel would wait in the tunnels. When Roe had Maris, she would signal by lighting a candle in a specific window. Then Nathaniel would extract them both. It was a terrible plan. Too many variables. Too many ways it could fail. But it was the only plan they had. That night, they slept in a room above the tavern. One bed, one chair. Nathaniel took the chair without discussion. Roe lay in the darkness listening to him breathe. She should sleep. She needed rest for tomorrow. But her mind would not stop racing. Nathaniel, she whispered, yes, if the thing goes wrong tomorrow, if I do not make it out, do not talk in that way. Listen, if I do not make it out, you keep going. You take back your kingdom. You stop Gabriel. You do not waste time mourning me. Silence, then I cannot promise that. Why not? Because, his voice was rough, because you are important to me, more important than you should be. Rose's heart skipped. What does that mean? It means, Nathaniel said slowly, that the moon goddess has a twisted sense of humor. And I am paying the price for a lifetime of arrogance. She sat up in bed, looking at the shadow in the chair. What are you saying? I am saying, he replied, that you are my mate, my fated mate, the one the goddess chose for me. And I have been trying to deny it, trying to protect you from it, but I cannot anymore. If you die tomorrow, part of me dies with you. That is the truth. Ro felt the words hit her with force. Mate, the sacred bond that wolves spoke of in whispers, the connection that could not be broken or denied, the love that transcended reason. When did you know? The moment I woke up in your apartment? Your scent, the coin's glow when you touched me. Everything about you called to the wolf inside me. He paused. I should have told you. I am sorry. Why did you not? Because if Gabriel finds out you are my mate, he will use you to destroy me. He will hurt you in ways I cannot even imagine. And I would rather die than see you suffer for my sake. Roe processed this. The distance he kept. The way he pulled back when they got too close. The protective instinct that bordered on obsessive. It all made sense now. She got out of bed and crossed the room. Knelt in front of his chair so they were at eye level. Nathaniel Ashcroft, she said quietly, I bought you for a copper coin. That makes you mine. Not the moon goddesses, not fate's, mine. And I choose to walk into that palace tomorrow because it is the right thing to do, not because of some mystical bond, because it is right, Ro. So stop trying to protect me from destiny and start trusting me to make my own choices. Mate or not, bond or not, I am doing this. They stared at each other. Then Nathaniel reached out and cupped her face with one large hand. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. You are going to be the death of me, he murmured. Probably Ro agreed. He leaned forward, and for a moment she thought he would kiss her, wanted him to kiss her. But instead he rested his forehead against hers. Come back to me tomorrow, he whispered. Please, I will try my arm. That is not good enough. It is all I have got. They stayed in that way for a long moment. Then Ro pulled back and returned to the bed. This time when she closed her eyes, she felt calmer. She had a purpose now, a mission. And maybe somewhere underneath all the fear and uncertainty, she had a reason worth fighting for. The palace was even more imposing up close. It rose from the mountainside in the way a natural extension of rock might, all sharp angles and dark stone. Guards patrolled the walls. Warlocks stood at the gates, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Ro approached the servants' entrance on the south side dressed in clothes they had stolen from a laundry line. Rough homespun, patched and mended, the uniform of poverty. She knocked on the door. A harried-looking woman answered, flour dusting her apron. Kitchen help, yes, ma'am. I heard you were hiring. The woman looked her up and down. You worked in a kitchen before 3 years at the Silver Kettle in the Gray Market. References, dead or gone. I came here looking for a fresh start, the woman sighed. Fine, we are desperate. Barely anyone wants to work here anymore. Too much fear, too much cruelty. But the pay is good if you keep your head down and do not ask questions. I am very good at not asking questions. Come in then, and welcome to hell. Rose stepped through the door. She was inside. The palace kitchens were chaos. 30 people working in a space meant for 20, everyone shouting everything on fire, or about to be. The head cook was a woman named Betha Ironwood, tall and broad-shouldered, with arms resembling tree trunks and a voice that could shatter glass. You, new girl, what is your name, Ro? Ro, what just Ro? Fine. Just Ro, you are on pot scrubbing. Station 3. Do not talk, do not complain, do not slack. Understand. Yes, ma'am. The work was brutal. Rose scrubbed pots until her hands were raw, carried water until her back screamed, peeled vegetables until her fingers bled. But she kept her eyes open, kept watching, learning the layout, identifying which servants were human and which were wolves in human form, noting which guards were cruel and which merely bored. At lunch, she sat beside a young man who introduced himself as Jonas. He had kind eyes and tired hands. They ate in silence for a while before he spoke. You are new, first day. Word of advice. Keep your head down. Do not look at the guards. Do not go wandering. This place, it eats people, especially people who are curious. I will remember that, Rose said. Then carefully, what about the prisoners? Jonas went still. What about them? I hear there are dungeons, political prisoners, hostages. You heard right, but nobody talks about them. Nobody asks. The last maid who asked questions disappeared. They said she tried to escape. They said a lot of things. He hesitated. None of them good. Ro filed that away. After the meal, she continued working, kept listening, and slowly, piece by piece, she assembled a picture of the palace, where Maris might be held, how to reach the East Tower, when the guards changed shifts. It took 3 days. 3 days of scrubbing and carrying and listening. 3 days of aching muscles and exhausted mind. 3 days of wondering if Nathaniel was still waiting in the tunnels below, if he thought she had abandoned him, if he was safe, and 3 days of noticing things. The way the servants whispered about a boy in the East Wing, a child who cried at night, a 5-year-old with dark hair and blue eyes who never saw his father. Pieces of a puzzle Ro was beginning to understand. On the third night, as she lay in the servants' dormitory surrounded by snoring women, Jonas appeared in the doorway. He gestured for her to follow. They met in a storage room that smelled of onions and old cheese. "You are not just a kitchen maid," Jonas said. It was not a question. "No, you are here for the girl." Aldrich's granddaughter. Ro's heart stopped. "How do you know?" "Because I am part of the resistance. There are 30 of us in this palace. Servants, guards, even a few minor nobles. We have been waiting for the true king to return. We heard rumors he was alive. And then you show up asking about prisoners." He smiled. "You are with him, are you not, with King Nathaniel?" "Yes," Jonas's smile widened. "Then let us help you. We cannot fight openly, but we can create distractions. Open doors. Look the other way. Tell us what you need." So Ro told him, and together they planned. On the fourth day, everything went wrong. The plan was simple. Jonas would create a distraction in the banquet hall. A fire, but controlled. Ro would use the chaos to slip into the East Tower, find Maris, and signal Nathaniel from the window. But simple plans never survived contact with reality. The fire started on schedule. Alarms rang through the palace. Guards rushed toward the commotion. Ro slipped through the chaos, heart pounding, making her way toward the dungeons. She found the East Tower, found the stairs leading down, found the third level, and found Maris. The girl was small and frail, chained to a wall in a cell that smelled of mildew and fear. Her hair was matted, her dress was torn, but her eyes were alert. "Are you real?" Maris whispered. "Or am I dreaming again?" "Real." Ro fumbled with the lock. "Your grandfather sent me. We are getting you out." The lock clicked open. Maris stumbled forward and Ro caught air. They made it halfway up the stairs before the guards found them. 3 of them. Big. Armed. They filled the narrow staircase. Ro pushed Maris behind her, pulled the knife Nathaniel had given her, remembered his lessons. Leverage. Angles. Speed. The first guard lunged. Ro ducked under his swing and drove her knife up into his armpit. Not deep, just enough to make him scream and drop his weapon. The second guard was smarter. He feinted left, then came in low. Ro tried to dodge but was not fast enough. His fist caught her in the ribs and pain exploded through her chest. She went down hard. The third guard grabbed Maris, dragging her back down the stairs. The girl fought, biting and clawing, but she was too weak. Ro tried to get up. Could not. Her ribs were screaming. Maybe broken. The guards dragged them both to the throne room. Gabriel Winters sat on a throne that had been Nathaniel's. He was tall and golden-haired, handsome in a manufactured way. Too perfect, too polished. He wore a crown that sat crooked on his head. He looked at Ro with eyes the color of ice. "Well," he said, "what do we have here? A little thief, a little fool." He leaned forward. "Do you know who I am?" "I know what you are," Ro said, tasting blood. A man drowning in grief who was taking everyone else down with him. Gabriel's expression went cold. "Put them both in the iron hold and send word to the tunnels. Tell the warlock we have bait. If Nathaniel is lurking, he will come for the girl. And when he does, we will be ready." They dragged Ro and Maris down into the deepest part of the dungeons. The Iron Hold, a place lined with silver and inscribed with wards, a place where wolves could not use their power. They threw Ro into a cell opposite Maris. The door slammed shut with a sound resembling a coffin closing. Ro sat in the darkness, her ribs throbbing, her hands shaking. She had failed. Failed Maris. Failed Aldrich. Failed Nathaniel. But she was not dead yet. And as long as she was breathing, she could still fight. From across the corridor, Maris's voice came soft and scared. "Are we going to die?" Ro thought about lying, thought about offering false comfort, but this girl had been lied to enough. "I do not know," Ro said honestly. "But if we do, we go down fighting." In the cell beside her, someone stirred in the darkness. A familiar voice, rough and broken. Ro. Her heart stopped. "Nathaniel, they caught me an hour ago." His voice was weak. "Warlock ambush in the tunnels. I am sorry, I failed you." "No," Ro pressed her face against the bars, trying to see him. "No, we are not done yet. We are not finished." Ro, there was pain in that single word. "I cannot protect you from here. I cannot save you. Then we save ourselves, together. Like we promised. How I do not know yet. But I will figure it out." She took a breath, ignoring the pain. "Because I am invisible. Remember, people do not see me. And that is my weapon." In the darkness of the Iron Hold, surrounded by silver and magic and despair, Rowena Hartley began to plan. She did not have strength, did not have power, did not have anything except her mind and her stubborn refusal to give up. But sometimes that was enough. Sometimes the invisible people were the ones who changed everything. The iron hold was designed to break wolves. Silver-lined walls that burned at the slightest touch. Air thick with suppression wards that pressed down with invisible weight. Darkness so complete it felt as though she were drowning. Rowena sat in that darkness and refused to break. Her ribs ached with every breath. Her hands were scraped raw from being dragged across stone floors. Her head throbbed where a guard had struck her, but her mind was clear, sharp, working through possibilities in the way her father used to work through card games, calculating odds, finding angles. Across the corridor, Maris whimpered in her sleep. The girl had cried herself into exhaustion hours ago. Ro had whispered to her through the bars until her voice went hoarse, told her stories, promised her things would be all right, lies that felt necessary. In the cell beside hers, Nathaniel was silent. She could hear his breathing labored and wet. They had hurt him, used silver and magic to subdue him, used cruelty because they could, Nathaniel. She whispered. A pause, then I am here. Are you badly hurt? Nothing that will not heal. If I ever get out of here. His voice was bitter, defeated. I walked right into their trap row. The warlock was waiting in the tunnels. I was so focused on reaching you that I did not see it coming. We both walked into traps. That makes us equal. We are not equal. I am supposed to be the king, the warrior, the one with power, and I am in a cage while you... He stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. You were trying to save a girl you never met, because it was right, and I could not even protect you. Ro pressed her face against the bars, trying to see him in the darkness. You taught me to fight, to breathe, to keep walking when I wanted to stop. You fixed my apartment. You cooked me soup. You trusted me when everyone else looked through me. She paused. That is protection, Nathaniel. Just a different kind. It was not enough. It was everything. Silence. Then soft and broken, I cannot lose you. You will not. Because we are getting out of here. How we are in the most secure prison in the kingdom. Gabriel knows we are here. He is probably planning our executions right now. There is no escape. Rose smiled in the darkness. You are thinking as a king would, as someone important, someone people watch. But nobody watches the servants. Nobody sees the help. What are you saying? I am saying I made friends in the kitchens, and friends are more powerful than armies. The guards changed shifts at dawn. Ro tracked time by listening to footsteps, counting intervals. The dungeon operated on a rhythm, and rhythms could be learned, could be exploited. When Betha Ironwood appeared outside her cell an hour after dawn, Ro was ready. The head cook was dressed in her usual stained apron, carrying a tray of what passed for food in the dungeons. Thin gruel, stale bread, but her eyes were alert, calculating. You, Betha said loudly for the guards to hear. Eat. King's orders. He wants you healthy for the execution. She slid the tray through the slot in the door, but as she did, her other hand moved. Fast, deliberate. A small metal object clattered to the floor of Ro's cell. A key. Ro kept her face neutral, took the tray with shaking hands. Thank you. Betha moved to the next cell. To Nathaniel. To Maris. Delivering food. Delivering hope. When she left, Ro waited, counted to 100, made sure the guards had settled back into their posts. Then she picked up the key. It was small and crude, probably made in the palace forge by someone sympathetic to their cause. Jonas, maybe? Or one of the other 30 resistance members scattered through the palace. She crawled to the door, felt for the lock in the darkness. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the key twice. Easy, Nathaniel whispered from the next cell. Slow, steady. Ro took a breath, remembered his lessons. Breathing from the belly, calming the mind. She tried again. The lock clicked. The sound was so loud in the silence that Ro was certain the guards would come running. But they did not. They were used to the sounds of the dungeon. The scrape of metal, the groan of old doors, background noise. Ro pushed the door open an inch, peered out. 2 guards at the end of the corridor, both facing away, both talking in low voices. She slipped out, moved in the way a shadow might, in the way she had moved through the gray market her whole life, invisible. She reached Nathaniel's door, worked the lock. It took longer this time. The mechanism was different, more complex. Her fingers cramped. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Come on, she whispered. Come on. Click. Nathaniel emerged from his cell as though he were being dragged up from the depths. He was in bad shape, worse than she had thought. His face was swollen. His ribs were wrapped in makeshift bandages that were soaked through with blood. The silver cuffs were still on his wrists, burning into his skin, but his eyes were clear, focused. Maris, he whispered. Ro moved to the girl's cell, got her out. Maris clung to her, too weak to stand alone. Now what? Nathaniel asked. Now we do not run, Ro said. We finish this. You want to confront Gabriel? In this condition, Ro, we are barely standing. Exactly. We are barely standing and we are still here. Still fighting. That is more powerful than any army. She looked at him. Do you trust me with my life? Good. Because I have a plan and it is going to require you to do a difficult thing. What? Let me lead. They did not sneak out of the dungeons. They walked. Ro in front, her chin high despite the pain. Nathaniel behind her, one hand on Maris to steady the girl. They moved through corridors as though they belonged there, as though they had every right to be free. They passed servants who stared, then looked away. Past guards who reached for weapons, then hesitated. Because Ro was walking with purpose, with authority, with the kind of confidence that made people second-guess their orders. When they reached the main level, Jonas was waiting. He took one look at them and made a decision. He turned to the other servants in the hall, to the guards, to everyone within earshot. The true king has returned, Jonas called out, and we will not serve the usurper any longer. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a maid stepped forward, then a cook, then a guard. One by one, people began to move, not toward Gabriel's defense, toward Nathaniel. We cannot fight, an older man said, his voice shaking. We are not warriors. You do not have to fight, Ro replied. You just have to stop. Stop cooking, stop cleaning, stop serving. Let this palace grind to a halt. Show Gabriel that he is not the one with power. You are. A woman in the back spoke up. He will punish us. Then let him try. Ro's voice was steady. Let him try to run a kingdom with no one to help him. Let him try to rule when the invisible people refuse to be invisible anymore. The crowd murmured, uncertain, afraid, but also hopeful. Betha Ironwood stepped forward, her massive frame cutting through the crowd. I am done serving tyrants. Who is with me? Hands rose. Slowly at first, then faster, then the entire room. Jonas nodded. Then it is decided. As of this moment, the palace staff is on strike. No food, no cleaning, no service. Not until the true king sits on the throne. Gabriel will go mad, someone whispered. Good, Ro said. Let him. They took over the servants' wing, barricaded the doors, sent messages to every corner of the palace. The help is done helping. The invisible are visible now. And Gabriel, sitting in his throne room, surrounded by mercenaries and warlocks, suddenly realized he was sitting in a palace that had stopped working. No food arrived for breakfast. No one cleaned the halls. No one lit the fires. The machinery of the palace, the invisible labor that made everything function, simply stopped. By midday, Gabriel was furious. Bring them to me, he roared. All of them. I will have them executed. But his guards could not find them. The servants had vanished into passages and hidden rooms they knew better than anyone. The palace was their territory. They had scrubbed every inch of it. They knew every secret. By evening, Gabriel was desperate. Fine, he snarled. If they want their king, they can have him. Bring Nathaniel to the throne room. We will settle this the old way. Combat, winner takes the crown. Nathaniel heard the challenge. He was in the servants' wing, his wounds cleaned and bandaged by people who had served in his court before Gabriel's betrayal. He was weak, but healing. The silver cuffs were off, though the burns remained. I have to go, he said to Ro. This is the only way to end it. No. Ro put her hand on his arm. This is what he wants. He wants a fight. He wants violence. He wants to reduce this to who is stronger. Do not give him Matt. Then what do I give him? The truth about Isolde, about grief, about the fact that he is not a villain. He is a father who lost his way. Nathaniel stared at her. How do you know that? Because I have been listening, watching, learning. She had spent the day talking to servants who had been in the palace since before Gabriel's coup, piecing together the story, the late-night crying they heard from Gabriel's chambers, the 5-year-old boy who lived in the East Wing cared for by nannies barely seeing his father, the way Gabriel flinched whenever anyone mentioned Isolde's name. He has a son, Rose said quietly. Kai, 5 years old. Isolde died giving birth to him. And Gabriel has been blaming himself and you and everyone else because he cannot face the fact that he is raising his son alone and has no idea how. Nathaniel's face went pale. I did not know. I did not know she was pregnant when she died. No one knew, except Gabriel, and he has been carrying that grief and that guilt for 5 years. She looked at Nathaniel. You need to give him permission to be human again, to be a father, to stop being the king and start being the man his son needs. How we bring Kai to him. They found the boy in the East Wing playing with the wooden soldiers on a carpet worn thin by generations of royal children. He looked up when they entered, a small child with his mother's dark hair and his father's ice blue eyes. Who are you, Kai asked. My name is Ro, and I am a friend of your father. Daddy does not have friends. Daddy has soldiers. The words cut deeper than any blade. Ro knelt beside the boy. When was the last time you saw your daddy? Kai thought about it. A long time. He is very busy. The nannies say he is being a king, but I think he just does not like me. Why would you think that? Because he looks sad when he sees me. As though I make him sad. Ro's throat tightened. You do not make him sad, sweetheart. You remind him of someone he loved very much. Your mama. And sometimes people get confused. They think if they avoid the thing that makes them sad, the sadness will go away. But it does not. It just grows. Kai processed this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand an adult world. Can I make him not sad? I think you are the only one who can. Will you come with me? Will you help me help your daddy? The boy looked uncertain. Then he nodded. Okay. The throne room was packed. Gabriel sat on the throne, his crown gleaming under torchlight. He had called every noble, every soldier, every person of importance in the kingdom. This would be a spectacle, a demonstration of power. Nathaniel walked in alone. No weapons, no armor, just a man in borrowed clothes with burns on his wrists and determination in his eyes. The crowd parted for him, silence fell. Gabriel stood. Brother, you came. I came. But not to fight you, no. Gabriel's laugh was bitter. Then you came to die. Because I will not yield. I will not give up this throne. It is mine now. It was never about the throne, Nathaniel said quietly. It was about Isolde. Gabriel flinched. Do not speak her name. Why, because it hurts. Because you loved her and lost her and blame me. I am sorry, Gabriel. I am sorry I did not know she was your mate. I am sorry I did not protect her. I am sorry I did not see you drowning in grief. Sorry does not bring her back. No, it does not. Nothing brings her back. Nothing heals that wound. Nathaniel took a step closer. But destroying everything she loved does not honor her memory. It spits on it. You do not know what she loved. I know she loved you. I know she healed people because she believed in compassion, in mercy, in giving second chances. Nathaniel gestured to the throne room. Is this mercy? Is this what she would have wanted? Gabriel's face twisted. You do not get to tell me what she would have wanted. You did not know her. You are right, I did not. But someone here did. The doors at the back of the throne room opened. Rowena walked in, and beside her, holding her hand, was a small boy with dark hair and blue eyes. The room went silent. Every eye turned to the child. Gabriel's face went white. Kai. The boy looked at his father sitting on the throne, at the crown, at the guards, at the cold, hard man who barely resembled the father he remembered from before. Daddy, Kai said, his voice small and uncertain. Why are you so angry all the time? Gabriel's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Ro knelt beside Kai, her hand on his shoulder. When did you last hold your son Gabriel? When did you last read him a story, or tuck him into bed, or tell him you loved him? Gabriel stared at her. His hands were shaking. I cannot. Why? Because he has her eyes. He has her face. Every time I look at him, I see her. I see what I lost, what I could not save. So you avoid him, Rose said gently. You stay away. You let nannies raise him because it is easier than facing your grief. But do you know what that does to a child? It makes him think he is the problem, that he is the reason you are sad, that he is not enough. Kai tugged on Rose's sleeve. Is that true? Does Daddy not like me because I look like Mama? Gabriel made a sound, not a word, just a broken animal noise. He stood from the throne and took a step forward, then another. Then he was running. He dropped to his knees in front of his son, pulled the boy into his arms, held him so tightly Ro thought he might break. And Gabriel Winters, the usurper king, the man who had betrayed his brother and seized a throne, wept. I am sorry, he sobbed into Kai's hair. I am so sorry. You are not the problem. You are the best thing she ever gave me. You are her gift, and I have been such a coward, such a fool. Kai wrapped his small arms around his father's neck. It is okay, Daddy. I am here. I am here. The throne room watched in silence. Some people looked away, some wiped their eyes, but no one interrupted. Nathaniel approached slowly, knelt beside his brother. Gabriel. Gabriel looked up, his face wet with tears. I am sorry. For everything. For what I did to you. For the throne. For the betrayal. I was drowning and I dragged everyone else down with me. I know. And I forgive you. Gabriel stared at him. You should not. I do not deserve it. Forgiveness is not about deserving. Nathaniel placed a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. It is about choosing to let go, to heal, to move forward. Isolde would want you to move forward, to be the father Kai needs. Can you do that? Gabriel looked at his son, at the small face looking up at him with hope and love and a child's unshakable faith that parents could fix anything. Can I? Gabriel whispered. Can I still be his father after everything I have done? You never stopped being his father, Rose said softly. You just forgot how. Gabriel held Kai tighter. Then with visible effort, he reached up and removed the crown. He held it out to Nathaniel. This was always yours. I was just keeping it warm. Badly. Nathaniel took the crown, but he did not put it on. Instead, he looked at Rose. She had made this happen. Her plan, her courage, her ability to see what no one else saw. The copper coin she had used to buy him. It was in her pocket. She could feel its weight, its warmth. As though sensing his thoughts, the coin began to glow. Soft at first, then brighter. Bright enough that people in the throne room gasped and pointed. Rose pulled it out. The copper surface was transforming. Runes appeared, ancient script that spiraled around the edges. The metal itself was changing. Not copper anymore. Purer. It caught the light and threw it back in rainbow prisms. What is happening? Rose whispered. Nathaniel smiled. The prophecy. You are fulfilling it. The coin rose from her palm, hovered in the air, and as they watched it reshaped itself, flowing as water might, forming into a new shape. A circlet, delicate and beautiful, etched with the same ancient runes. It settled onto Rose's head. The moment it touched her, her vision changed. She could see threads, invisible connections between people, between hearts. She could see truth and lies written in the air as colors only she could perceive. She looked at Gabriel and saw his grief, his guilt, his love for his son, and all of it laid bare. She looked at Nathaniel and saw his devotion, his fear for her, his hope for the future. She looked at the throne room and saw fear and hope and uncertainty and courage all tangled together. The peacemaker queen, an old woman in the crowd, whispered. The prophecy said she would come, that she would see what others could not, that she would heal what was broken. Rose touched the circlet. It felt warm, alive. I do not understand. Your bloodline, Nathaniel said. You are descended from Queen Isadora, the first human queen. 300 years ago, she united the wolves and humans, ended a war that had lasted generations. She had the gift of truth sight, the ability to see into hearts, to know lies from truth. That gift was lost when her line was thought extinct. But it was not extinct. It was just, he smiled, invisible. Rose looked at her hands, at the circlet, at the throne room full of people watching her. I am nobody. I am just a waitress. You were never just anything, Nathaniel said. You were exactly who you needed to be, who we all needed you to be. Gabriel spoke, his voice hoarse. What will you do with me? I have betrayed you, hurt you, taken your throne. By law, you should execute me. Nathaniel looked at Rose. She met his eyes, and he saw the answer there. You will live, Nathaniel said to Gabriel. You will raise your son. You will make amends. You will become the ambassador of reconciliation. You will travel the kingdom and repair what you broke. Not as a king, as a man, as a father, as my brother. Gabriel closed his eyes. Tears leaked from the corners. Thank you. Do not thank me. Thank her. Nathaniel gestured to Rose. She saved us all. The coronation happened 3 days later. Time enough to send word across the kingdom. Time enough for the nobles to return. Time enough for the palace to come back to life under proper management. Rose spent those days in a daze. People kept calling her queen, kept bowing, kept treating her as though she were important. It felt wrong, uncomfortable. Shoes that did not fit. You will get used to it, Beth had told her as she helped Rose dress for the ceremony. What if I do not want to get used to it? Then you will change what it means to be queen. Make it yours. The cook smiled. You are good at that. Making things yours. The ceremony was held in the grand hall. Nathaniel was crowned first. The ancient ritual. The sacred words. The crown placed on his head by the high priestess. Then it was Rose's turn. She walked to the throne, knelt before Nathaniel, felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. Nathaniel spoke the words of binding, of partnership, of shared rule. Then he took her hand and raised her to stand beside him. "Rowena Hartley," he said, "you bought a king for a copper coin, and in doing so you saved a kingdom. Will you stand beside me? Will you be my queen? My partner, my mate?" Ro looked at him, at the man she had pulled from the mud, at the king she had helped restore, at the mate the moon goddess had chosen for her. She looked at the throne room, at the servants who had followed her, at the nobles who had returned, at Gabriel standing in the crowd with Kai on his shoulders, at Jonas and Betha and Maris and Aldrich, at all the invisible people who were visible now. "I will," she said. The circlet on her head glowed. The throne room erupted in cheers, and Rowena, who had spent 23 years being invisible, felt seen for the first time in her life. 1 year later, the kingdom had changed, not overnight, not easily, but steadily, the way water wears down stone. Rose stood on the palace balcony, her hand resting on her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant. The baby kicked and she smiled. Nathaniel came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her, rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about everything?" "Nothing. How strange life is. Strange good or strange bad, strange miraculous." He kissed her temple. "What will we tell our child about how we met the truth? That I bought their father for a penny. That he taught me to be brave. That we saved each other." "I like that story." Ro turned in his arms, looked up at him. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me? Never. Not for a single moment. You are the best investment I ever made." She laughed. "That is terrible, but true." They stood together, watching the sun set over the kingdom, over the mountains and valleys, over the cities and villages, over all the invisible people who were building a new world. Kai came running onto the balcony, Gabriel chasing behind him. The boy was laughing. His father was smiling. They looked whole. Ro felt the baby kick again, felt Nathaniel's arms tighten around her, felt the weight of the circlet on her head lighter than it should be. Down in the city, in the places where servants gathered and workers rested, in the forgotten corners, where the invisible people lived their invisible lives, children listened to a new story. Not about heroes with swords, not about kings with armies, about a waitress who bought a king for a penny, who walked into a palace with nothing but courage, who stopped a war with compassion instead of violence, who proved that the quietest voices could change the world. If someone would just listen, every person will be seen. Ro whispered her hand over Nathaniel's hand on her belly. "Every voice will matter. That is my promise." Nathaniel kissed her. "Our child will grow up in a better world because of you, because of us. Yes, because of us." The sun set, the stars came out, and in the kingdom of the wolves, where invisible people were finally visible, where broken things were being healed, where a waitress had become a queen, hope bloomed in the way wildflowers bloom in spring. Persistent, beautiful, impossible to ignore. And somewhere in the gray market, Vincent Malone's operations were shut down by royal decree. Marco had disappeared into the borderlands. The debt that had driven a waitress to an auction yard died with the old ways. It all started with one copper coin, one desperate choice, one invisible woman who refused to stay invisible anymore. The end was just the beginning. And the beginning was everything.